My son sat across the table during the will reading with a confident little smile on his face. The kind of smile that says, "I already know how this ends." He believed there was no way I would receive anything from his mother's fortune. After all, by the time she died, her estate was worth nearly $340 million. To him, I was just the ex-husband from a different life, someone who no longer mattered. But when the lawyer read one single sentence, everything changed. The smile on my son's face disappeared so quickly it almost looked painful. A second later, he exploded in anger so loudly that the walls of that quiet office seemed to shake. But that moment didn't start there. It started 3 days earlier, in my small apartment, with a cup of coffee. That morning was like any other. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone a little cold. My neighbor was yelling through the thin apartment walls again. "You need to fix those stupid sprinklers." Her voice was loud enough to wake half the building. Apparently, the automatic sprinkler system I had installed a few weeks earlier had one loose connection. Every couple of days, water would spill over the edge of my small garden and flood her flower beds. I had tried explaining that I was going to fix it that weekend. But patience was not one of her strengths. I sighed and set my coffee cup down on the counter. That's when the phone started ringing. I ignored it at first. I figured it was probably another sales call or a wrong number. But it kept ringing. And ringing. And ringing. Finally, I picked it up. "Hello, this is Jerry." The woman on the other end spoke with the careful tone people use when delivering serious news. "Mr. Flores? My name is Janet Morrison. I'm calling from Morrison and Welsh law offices." Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. "I'm calling regarding Brianna Flores." My hand froze around the phone. No one had said her full name to me in years. "What about her?" I asked slowly. There was a brief pause. "I'm very sorry to inform you. Mrs. Flores passed away Tuesday evening." The words hit me harder than I expected. I slowly sat down at the kitchen table. Tuesday. That meant she had been gone for 3 days already. 3 days while I had been worrying about sprinklers and spilled coffee. "Mr. Flores," the woman asked gently, "are you still there?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm here." She explained that the funeral would be held on Friday afternoon. Then she said something that surprised me even more. "There will also be a reading of the will afterward. Your name appears in the document, so your presence is requested." I blinked. "My name?" "Yes, sir. You are listed as a beneficiary." For a moment, I thought I had heard her wrong. My ex-wife had built her fortune after our divorce. She had turned a small consulting business into a massive company that employed hundreds of people. I had read about her success in newspapers sometimes, but I had never imagined she would leave anything to me. "I see," I said slowly. The lawyer gave me the time and location. Then the call ended. I sat in silence for a long time. The coffee in my cup had gone completely cold. Outside the window, the sky looked grey and heavy. And suddenly, memories I hadn't thought about in years began returning. Memories of the first time I met her. It was the winter of 1987. I was sitting inside a small diner eating a slice of apple pie when I heard someone arguing near the counter. A young woman in a bright red coat was speaking loudly to the restaurant manager. "You're telling me you won't hire a woman as weekend manager because women can't handle pressure?" Her voice carried across the entire diner. "That's ridiculous." The manager looked uncomfortable. That's not what I meant." "Yes, it is," she interrupted. "You just said it in a nicer way." I remember staring at her from across the room. She had dark hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of confidence that filled every corner of the place. She wasn't just angry. She was brilliant. Finally, she placed a business card on the counter. "When you decide to hire based on ability instead of outdated ideas, give me a call." Then she turned and walked out. The doorbells rang as she left. The diner suddenly felt strangely quiet. "That woman is trouble," the manager muttered. I stood up from my seat. "No," I said. "That woman is extraordinary." 3 days later, I gathered enough courage to call the number on that business card. When she answered, her voice sounded curious. "This is Brianna." "My name is Jerry," I said nervously. "We haven't met, but I saw you at Murphy's Diner last Friday." There was a small pause. Then she laughed. You're the guy who defended me to the manager." I was surprised. "You heard that?" "I was grabbing my gloves outside," she said. Her voice softened slightly. "So, Jerry, why are you calling?" I took a deep breath. "Because I'd like to take you to dinner." Another pause. "Is this a business consultation, or a date?" she asked. "Definitely a date," I said. She laughed again. "All right then," she said. "Saturday night." That dinner lasted 3 hours. We talked about everything. Her childhood, my job at the power plant, movies, books, dreams. By the time we left the restaurant, I already knew something important. I was falling in love. 6 months later, I asked her to marry me. 2 years after that, our son was born. For a while, life felt perfect. But sometimes, perfect things slowly begin to change. And when they do, you don't always notice it right away. Looking back now, I realize the beginning of the end started long before our divorce. It started the moment success began to matter more than everything else. And none of us understood where that road would eventually lead. Not me. Not her. And definitely not our son. But what happened after she died? That was something none of us could have predicted. And it all came down to one single sentence in her will. The next 2 days passed in a strange kind of silence. I kept thinking about the phone call, about the lawyer's calm voice, about the words she had said so carefully. "You are listed as a beneficiary." It didn't make sense. After our divorce, Brianna and I had barely spoken except for matters involving our son. She built her empire while I lived a quiet life working normal jobs, fixing things around the house, and enjoying simple routines. Our lives had moved in completely different directions. So why would she put my name in her will? That question kept circling in my mind like a bird that refused to land. Friday arrived faster than I expected. The funeral was held in a large chapel on the west side of the city. I hadn't been there before, but judging by the expensive cars parked outside, it was clear this place usually handled wealthy families. Black suits, dark dresses, low whispers. The air smelled like polished wood and fresh flowers. I stepped inside slowly, feeling like I didn't quite belong there. Some people glanced at me with curiosity. Others didn't recognize me at all. And honestly, I preferred it that way. I quietly took a seat near the back. From there, I could see the front of the chapel where Brianna's photograph stood beside the casket. In the picture, she was smiling confidently, the same determined smile she used to wear when she was planning something big. For a moment, memories rushed back again. The young woman in the red coat. The long dinner conversations. The way she used to stay awake late at night, writing business plans on yellow notepads. Back then, success was just a dream. Now it had become an empire. But she wasn't here anymore to see it. Then the doors opened again, and the entire room seemed to shift. My son walked in. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, the kind that probably cost more than my entire monthly rent. His wife walked beside him, holding his arm like they were arriving at a formal event rather than a funeral. People stood up to greet them. Hands were shaken. Shoulders were patted. Sympathy was offered. He accepted it all with a calm, confident expression. When his eyes finally moved across the room, they landed on me. For a second, just 1 second, his expression tightened. Then he looked away. No greeting. No nod. Nothing. It wasn't surprising. Our relationship had been distant for years. Still, seeing it happen so openly felt heavier than I expected. The service began. Speakers talked about Brianna's achievements, her intelligence, her leadership, her incredible business success. And all of it was true. She had built something remarkable. But as I listened, I noticed something strange. No one talked about the small moments. No one mentioned how she used to dance around the kitchen while cooking pasta, or how she laughed when a movie had a terrible ending, or how she once spent an entire weekend helping our son build a wooden treehouse in the backyard. The room celebrated the powerful businesswoman, but the woman I remembered, the real one, seemed almost forgotten. After the ceremony ended, people slowly began leaving the chapel. Clusters of quiet conversations formed near the doors. I stood up and prepared to leave too. That's when I heard a voice behind me. Well, look who decided to show up. I turned around. My son was standing a few feet away. His arms were crossed. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was cold. "I didn't think you'd bother coming," he said. "She was still your mother," I replied calmly. He gave a short laugh. "Funny. You didn't seem too interested in her when she was alive." I could feel several nearby guests quietly listening now, but I kept my voice steady. "That's not something we should discuss here." He stepped closer. "Relax," he said. "It doesn't matter anyway." His eyes moved toward the lawyer's office building across the street. Once the will is read, everything moves forward. The company, the houses, the investments, all of it. There it was. The confidence again. That same confident smile I would see later at the lawyer's office. He believed the future was already decided. Then he looked back at me. "And whatever you think you're doing here, don't expect anything." I didn't respond. Sometimes silence says more than arguments ever could. After a moment, he shook his head and walked away with his wife. An hour later, we gathered inside the law office. The room was large but quiet. A long wooden table sat in the center. Several relatives, business partners, and board members took seats around it. I chose a chair near the far end. The lawyer who had called me earlier sat at the head of the table with a folder in front of her. My son leaned back in his chair, looking relaxed, almost amused. His wife whispered something to him and they both smiled. Then the lawyer cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "As you know, we are here to read the final will and testament." The room fell completely silent. Papers rustled softly as she opened the folder. My son's confident smile grew wider. He looked around the room as if everything was already his. But before the lawyer began reading, I leaned back in my chair and spoke quietly. "Before we start." Several heads turned toward me. I gave a small shrug. "This story gets interesting in a moment." Then I looked straight ahead and said calmly, "So, wait for a while." And with a small half-smile I added, "Also, do subscribe." A few people in the room looked confused, but I just folded my hands and waited, because in a few seconds, everything in that room was about to change. The room became very quiet after that. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The tense kind. The kind where everyone is waiting for something important to happen. The lawyer adjusted her glasses and opened the folder in front of her. The pages inside were thick and carefully organized. You could tell this wasn't a simple will. Brianna had planned things very carefully. Across the table, my son leaned back comfortably in his chair. One arm rested casually on the table. The other tapped his phone. His confidence filled the room. He didn't look worried. Not even a little. Why would he? Everyone in that room knew the same thing. Brianna's empire was worth hundreds of millions. Her company. Her houses. Her investments. Her luxury properties in 3 different states. And as her only child, my son believed every single piece of it belonged to him. He had that same smug smile I noticed earlier. The kind of smile that says the game is already won. The lawyer began reading. Her voice was calm and professional. "This document is the last will and testament of Brianna Elizabeth Flores." Everyone listened carefully. She started with the formal legal lines first. Standard procedures. Verification. Legal declarations. Nothing surprising yet. Then she began listing small personal gifts. A vintage watch for an old business partner. Jewelry for Brianna's sister. A donation to a university scholarship fund. Several charities received large amounts. My son barely reacted. These were small pieces compared to the real prize. The company. The fortune. The inheritance everyone expected. Finally, the lawyer paused. She turned a page. Then she looked directly at my son. "The remaining estate," she said slowly, "including all corporate holdings, real estate, and financial assets." Now the room leaned forward. Even I could feel the tension rising. My son straightened slightly in his chair. His wife squeezed his arm. Here it comes. The moment he had been waiting for. Then the lawyer read one single sentence. And the entire room froze. "I leave full control of my estate and the majority of my personal fortune to my former husband." She looked down at the paper again. "Mr. Jerry Flores." For a second, no one moved. No one even breathed. It felt like the air had disappeared from the room. Then a chair slammed against the floor. What? My son jumped up so fast his chair tipped over behind him. That's impossible. His voice exploded through the office. People flinched. You must be reading that wrong, he shouted. His face had completely changed. The confident smile was gone. Now it was pure shock. Pure rage. The lawyer remained calm. I assure you, Mr. Flores, she said firmly, the document is very clear. She turned the page slightly so everyone could see the printed text. The estate, valued at approximately $340 million. Her eyes moved back to me. Will be transferred to Jerry Flores. The silence that followed was heavy. You could hear someone drop a pen across the room. My son stared at me like he was looking at a ghost. Then the shouting started. This is ridiculous. He slammed his hand on the table. This has to be fraud. He pointed directly at me. He manipulated her. Murmurs spread through the room. Several business partners looked shocked. Others looked uncomfortable. But the lawyer didn't react. She had probably seen scenes like this before. Mr. Flores, she said calmly, your mother prepared this will 2 years ago. She opened another folder. There are witnesses, notarized signatures, and legal verification. She paused. And there is also a personal letter she asked me to read aloud after the will. That made the room even quieter. A letter. My son looked confused. Then angry again. I don't care about a letter, he snapped. That money belongs to me. His voice was so loud it echoed against the walls. But the lawyer raised a hand. This letter, she said firmly, was very important to your mother. She opened the envelope slowly and began reading. My dear Dustin. The room fell silent again. My son, if you are hearing this, it means the will has already been read. I know you are shocked. I know you are angry. And I know you believe this decision is unfair. The lawyer paused briefly. My son stood there breathing heavily. She continued reading. But the truth is, I spent many years watching both of you. I watched one man build a quiet life with patience and loyalty. And I watched another man learn to measure life only by money and power. A few people in the room shifted uncomfortably. I built a business empire. But somewhere along the way, I lost the most important parts of life. Your father never forgot them. And that is why I trust him with everything I built. My son's face turned pale. The lawyer continued. If you want this inheritance one day, you must first learn the values your father tried to teach you. Respect, humility, and the meaning of family. When you finally understand those things, then Jerry will know what to do with what I leave behind. The letter ended. The lawyer closed the envelope slowly. The room stayed silent. No one knew what to say. Then my son exploded again. This is insane. He shoved his chair aside. She wouldn't do this. He pointed at me again, furious. You think you won something today? His voice shook the room. But I didn't stand. I didn't argue. I just sat there quietly. Because the truth was, this wasn't about winning. And deep down, I think Brianna knew that. For a long moment, nobody in the room moved. My son stood there breathing heavily. His fists were clenched so tight the veins on his hands were visible. The lawyer calmly placed the letter back into the envelope. Then she folded her hands on the desk. This concludes the written statement from Mrs. Flores, she said. But Dustin wasn't finished. Not even close. This is a joke, he said, shaking his head. A sick joke. He pointed toward me again. You expect me to believe she gave him everything? His voice cracked with disbelief. This man couldn't even keep up with her when she was alive. The words echoed through the office. Some people looked away. Others watched quietly. And a few looked uncomfortable. Because even they knew something was wrong about this reaction. The lawyer spoke again. There is more information you should hear, Mr. Flores. Dustin laughed bitterly. Oh great. There's more. He dropped back into his chair, crossing his arms. Fine. Let's hear it. The lawyer opened another document. As stated in the will, Mr. Jerry Flores will become the legal controller of the estate. My son rolled his eyes. Yes, yes, we heard that already. But she continued. However, the will also contains a condition. Now the room leaned forward again. Conditions change everything. Even Dustin straightened slightly. The lawyer read slowly. Mr. Jerry Flores has been given full authority over the estate for the next 5 years. My son frowned. 5 years. She nodded. During that time, all financial decisions regarding the company and the assets will be made by him. Dustin laughed again. Great plan, Mom. He looked at me sarcastically. Let's put a retired electrician in charge of $1 billion operation. But the lawyer raised a hand. You should hear the rest. She continued reading. At the end of 5 years, Jerry Flores will decide whether Dustin Flores is ready to inherit the estate. The room went silent again. Dustin blinked. What? The lawyer repeated it clearly. Your inheritance is not automatic. It will depend entirely on your father's decision. For the first time since the reading began, Dustin looked stunned. You're telling me? He laughed nervously. You're telling me he decides if I get my own mother's money? The lawyer nodded. Yes. The silence in the room was heavy. I could feel everyone watching me now. Business partners, lawyers, executives, all wondering the same thing. What would I do? Dustin slowly turned his head toward me. His voice dropped lower now. More controlled, but somehow more dangerous. You can't possibly think this is real. I didn't answer, because honestly, I was still trying to process it myself. He stood again and leaned across the table. Let's be honest, he said quietly. You don't even understand this world. Corporate strategy. International investments. Financial markets. He shook his head. You'd destroy everything she built. For the first time, I spoke. Maybe. My calm answer caught him off guard. But your mother trusted me. The room stayed quiet. He scoffed. No. She tested you. His voice hardened again. And if you think I'm going to beg you for something that's already mine. He stepped closer. You don't know me at all. The lawyer interrupted gently. Mr. Flores, please sit. But he ignored her. His eyes stayed locked on mine. Then he said something that made several people in the room shift uncomfortably. You always wanted to prove you were better than her. His voice was cold. This is your chance, right? I shook my head slowly. No. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I said something simple. Something that surprised even me. I never wanted to beat your mother. I only wanted my family back. The words hung in the air. Dustin looked like he wanted to laugh again. But this time, he didn't. Across the room, one of Brianna's old business partners spoke quietly. She must have seen something we didn't. No one responded. But I think many people were thinking the same thing. The lawyer closed the file. The legal transfer will begin next week. She looked at me. Mr. Flores, we'll need to discuss several details regarding the estate management. I nodded slowly. Of course. But my son was already walking toward the door. Fast. Angry. Humiliated. Before leaving, he turned one last time. His eyes burned with rage. This isn't over. Then he walked out. The door slammed behind him. The room stayed silent. And suddenly, $340 million felt like the heaviest thing in the world. The office stayed quiet for a long moment after Dustin slammed the door. No one rushed after him. No one tried to stop him. It was the kind of silence that settles in when everyone realizes something big has just happened, and no one knows what comes next. I slowly leaned back in the chair. My hands felt heavy. My mind even heavier. $340 million. And somehow, I was now responsible for it. The lawyer gently cleared her throat. Mr. Flores, there is still one more thing your wife asked us to give you. I looked up. My wife. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. Even after all these years. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small envelope. Cream-colored. Sealed. My name written on the front in handwriting I knew instantly. Brianna's handwriting. After 15 years. I would recognize it anywhere. My chest tightened. "This was meant only for you," the lawyer said quietly. "It was written 6 months before she passed away." She slid the envelope across the table. I stared at it. For a moment. I didn't touch it. Because sometimes the truth inside an envelope can change everything. And part of me wasn't ready. "Take your time," the lawyer said. Everyone in the room suddenly seemed busy with something else. Looking at papers. Checking their phones. Pretending they weren't curious. But I knew they were. Everyone was wondering the same thing. Why would a woman leave her entire empire to the man she divorced 15 years ago? Finally, I picked up the envelope. My fingers felt slightly shaky as I opened it. Inside was a single folded letter. I unfolded it slowly and began to read. "Jerry, if you're reading this, it means I ran out of time." My throat tightened instantly. It was exactly how she used to talk. Direct. Honest. No wasted words. "I know this decision will shock you. It will probably anger Dustin too. But I made it carefully. And for reasons you deserve to understand." I took a slow breath. The room felt smaller suddenly. "You were never the man Dustin believes you were. And you were never the man I sometimes pretended you were either. You were better." My eyes stopped for a moment on that line. Better. After everything. She wrote that. "You always chose people over money. I used to think that made you weak. Now I know it made you wise." The words blurred slightly. Not from age. But from something else. Dustin is brilliant. Ambitious. Driven. But he learned only one half of life. The half I taught him. I felt a quiet weight settling in my chest. Because I already knew where this was going. He learned how to win. But he never learned how to care. I paused. Across the table, the lawyer pretended not to notice my silence. But she knew. Everyone knew this letter mattered. I kept reading. I spent years building my empire. But somewhere along the way, I realized something terrifying. I was building it for someone who might destroy it. My heart skipped slightly. Not because he isn't smart. But because he doesn't understand people. And businesses built without humanity eventually collapse. I leaned back slowly. That sounded exactly like Brianna. Sharp. Brutally honest. Even in a goodbye letter. The next lines made my hands freeze completely. "The only person who ever challenged my ambition was you. The only person who reminded me that success means nothing without people was you. And the only person Dustin might still learn that from is you." I closed my eyes for a moment. 15 years. 15 years of believing she saw me as a failure. And yet, here it was. Written clearly. I opened my eyes again and finished the letter. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. And I'm not asking you to fix Dustin. But if there is even a small chance that he can still learn what really matters, I know you're the only one who can teach him." The last line was short, but it hit harder than anything else. "Take care of our son. And Jerry, I never stopped respecting you. Brianna." The letter slowly slipped from my hands onto the desk. The room stayed silent. No one spoke. No one moved. After a moment, the lawyer asked quietly, "Are you all right, Mr. Flores?" I nodded slowly. Yes. But the truth was, I wasn't sure what I felt. Relief. Sadness. Regret. All mixed together. Because suddenly this inheritance didn't feel like money anymore. It felt like responsibility. A responsibility Brianna believed only I could carry. Across the table, one of the executives spoke carefully. "So, what happens now?" I looked down at Brianna's letter again. Then I folded it gently and placed it back in the envelope. "Now," I said quietly, "now I try to do the one thing she asked. Take care of our son." But deep down, I already knew something difficult. Dustin Flores was not a man who accepted lessons easily. Especially not from me. And the real battle hadn't even started yet. The next morning, the house felt different. You ever notice how a place can feel heavy even when nobody is talking? Yeah, that kind of silence. My daughter was in the kitchen pretending to scroll on her phone. My son-in-law sat on the couch watching TV like nothing had happened. But you know what? People can pretend with words. They can't pretend with energy. And that morning, the tension in that house could almost be touched. I quietly made my tea, sat at the dining table, and waited. Because when people lie, time usually does the talking for you. Around noon, there was a knock on the door. 3 short knocks. My son-in-law opened it, and the moment he saw who it was, his face changed. Not a small change. A full freeze. Standing outside the door was the building manager. Behind him, 2 workers. And behind them, a police officer. Now listen carefully. Nobody had called the police. At least, not from inside the house. But remember that tiny camera near the entrance? Yeah. Turns out the building security team had already been reviewing footage. Because my son-in-law had been causing trouble in the building for weeks. Arguments with neighbors. Parking fights. Late-night shouting. And when security saw him yelling at an old man with a broken leg the night before, well, they decided to check things properly. The officer stepped inside and calmly said, "Sir, we need to talk." My son-in-law tried to laugh it off. "Oh, this is just family stuff." But the officer didn't smile. He simply pointed toward the hallway. "Sir, we saw the footage." Silence. You could hear a pin drop. My daughter slowly looked up from her phone. "What footage?" The building manager turned the tablet screen toward her. And there it was. Clear as day. My son-in-law standing over me. Shouting. Threatening. While I sat there with a cast on my leg. And suddenly, the whole room shifted. My daughter's face lost its color. She looked at him. Then at me. Then back at him again. And for the first time, she actually saw the truth. You ever watch someone realize they backed the wrong person? It's painful. Not loud. Just quiet regret spreading across their face. That's exactly what happened. The officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we've received complaints about harassment in the building. We are going to need you to come downstairs and explain a few things." My son-in-law started panicking. No, this is a misunderstanding." But the officer had already heard enough. And just like that, the loudest man in the house suddenly had nothing left to say. They escorted him outside. The door closed, and the house finally went quiet again. My daughter sat down slowly. She didn't look at me. Not at first. And honestly, I didn't rush her. Some realizations need space. About 10 minutes passed. Then she finally spoke. Her voice was small. "Dad, I didn't know he treated you like that." I nodded slowly. "I know." And that's when her eyes filled with tears. "But yesterday, I told you to leave." Yeah, she did. And hearing her say it out loud again, well, that part still stung a little. But life teaches you something important as you get older. Sometimes people hurt you. Not because they're cruel, but because they're blind. She wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry." Just 2 words. But they were real. You can tell when an apology is heavy. When it comes from the chest, not the mouth. I looked at her and smiled. Not a big smile. Just a tired one. "It's okay." She shook her head. "No, it's not." And for the first time in years, my daughter hugged me like she used to when she was little. Tight. Like she was afraid I might disappear. And in that moment, something in that house finally healed. 2 weeks later, my leg started healing. The cast came off. The house became peaceful again. My son-in-law didn't return. Turns out, once the truth comes out, some people don't have the courage to come back. And honestly, that was probably for the best. My daughter slowly started rebuilding her life. Not quickly, but step by step. And me. I spent more time on my balcony again, watching the sunset, drinking tea, thinking about how strange life can be. Sometimes people believe the loudest voice in the room. But the truth? The truth is patient. It doesn't scream. It simply waits. And sooner or later, it walks in the door by itself. So yeah, that day my daughter told me, "Do what my husband says, or leave." At that moment it felt like the end of something. But funny enough, it was actually the beginning. The beginning of truth. The beginning of respect. And the beginning of peace. And if you've ever been in a moment where people doubt you, where someone talks down to you, remember something important. You don't always need to shout back. Sometimes, the strongest move you can make is simply sitting still and letting the truth arrive. Anyway, if you stayed with me through this whole story, I appreciate you. And hey, wait for a while, and do subscribe. Because trust me, I've got a lot more stories to tell. And some of them, well, they're even crazier than this one.